This is Mrs. Wainwright's Math Class, Chapter 10, Lesson 10.7c, Part 12. Elapsed time, finding a start time. The learning target. By the end of today's lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can find a start time when given an end time and an elapsed time. Let's review the vocabulary for this. A start time is the time that something begins or starts at. It's a time on a clock. Example, I began riding my bike at 9:15 a.m. 9:15 a.m. is a start time. That's the time I started riding my bike, and that 9:15 is the way you would see the time on a digital clock. End time is the time that something finishes or ends at. It's also a time on a clock. Example, I finished riding my bike at 12:36 p.m. 12:36 p.m. is an end time. That's when I finished or ended or stopped riding my bike. And 12:36 is a time you would see on a clock. Elapsed time is the time it takes for something to happen. Elapsed time is an hours and minutes type of time. It's not a clock time. So example, I rode my bike for 3 hours, 16 minutes. 3 hours and 16 minutes is an elapsed time. That's how long it took me to ride my bike or how long I was riding for, and we don't see it on a digital clock that way. In today's lesson, we will be given the end time, and we'll be given the elapsed time, and we're going to need to work our way backward to figure out the start time. Let's take a look at example number 1. Irene spent 2 hours 15 minutes jogging. If she finished jogging at 1:20 p.m., what time did she start? Well, as with any word problem, the first thing I need to do is go back and find what the question is asking. And the question wants to know is, what time did she start? I'm talking about time, and I need to know what time she started. That would be the start time. That's what I need to find out. Let's go back to the question and see what else I know. I know that Irene spent 2 hours and 15 minutes jogging. Well, 2 hours and 15 minutes is not a time on a clock, but it's how long she took doing the jogging. So this is going to be the elapsed time. What else do I know? I also know that she finished jogging at 1:20 p.m. And if she finished at that time will be her end time. So I have her end time, and I have the elapsed time, and I need to use those two things together to find out what is the start time. That's the question that I need to answer. Let's take a look at the next page and see how to do this. So as I learned in the last lesson, anytime I'm working with elapsed time, whether I'm trying to find the start time, the end time, or the elapsed time, I'm going to start by dividing my page into 3 columns. And I'm going to label my first column H for hours, my middle column 10M for 10 minutes, and my final column 1M for 1 minute. Since I know the end time and I know the elapsed time, but I don't know what time I started, I'm going to work backward. And to remember to do that, because it's very easy to forget, I'm going to write backward in a nice bright red right at the top of my page. I know that Irene jogged for 2 hours, so I'll put a 2 in the hours column, and 15 minutes, so I'll put a 10 in the 10-minute column and a 5 in the 1-minute column. I also know that Irene finished jogging at 1:20 p.m., so I'll write that down and underline it, since I always underline the first time in a column. I have 2 hours. Let me write down my 1 and my 2. Let's go to the 1. I have to go 1 hour before 1:20 p.m. Well, 1 hour before 1:20 p.m. would be 12:20. But when I get to the 12, I have to underline that. But again, I'm working backwards, so it's a little bit different. I wouldn't say 12:20 a.m. because at 12 it changes, and 12:20 it's already changed. So this is going to stay 12:20 p.m., but the hour before that, the 11, is where it will change to the a.m. So I'm going to put an arrow down there to remind me when I get to the 11, I have to change from p.m. to a.m. So this is 12:20 p.m. because it's in the 12 o'clock range. Now, 1 hour less than 12:20 p.m. is 11:20 a.m. That's before it changed to p.m. I'll take that 11:20 a.m. I will go ahead and bring it up, write it down, and put my line under it, 11:20 a.m. Now I know that I have to count backwards 10 minutes, so I'll write down my 10. What's 10 minutes less than 11:20 a.m.? 11:10 a.m. So I write that down. That's it. I finished my 10-minute column, so I'm going to move that time to my 1-minute column. I'll write down 11:10 a.m. and underline it, and I have to count backwards for 5 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so what's 1 minute less than 11:10 a.m.? 11:09 a.m. 1 minute less than that would be 11:08 a.m. 1 minute before that is 11:07 a.m. 1 minute before that would be 11:06 a.m. And 1 minute before that would be 11:05 a.m. So when I count backward, I find out that she started at 11:05 a.m. Let's go back and put that into our original problem. So the question said, what time did she start? The answer, Irene started jogging at 11:05 a.m. And that's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 1 right now. Let's take a look at example number 2. This is another format or fashion in which you may see a problem like this. Example number 2, start time blank. Elapsed time, 3 hours 42 minutes. End time, 2:17 p.m. So, of course, I'm working with elapsed time, so I'm going to make my 3 columns. My first column will be my H column for hours, my middle column will be my 10M column for 10 minutes, and my last column will be my 1M column for 1 minute. I know in this problem I was given the end time and the elapsed time. I need to find the start time, so I will be working backward. Write that in nice bright letters to remind myself. I know that there are 3 hours in the elapsed time and 42 minutes. So I'll write my 3 in my hours, my 40 in my 10 minutes, and my 2 in my 1 minute. She started at 2:17 p.m. So I'll write that time and underline it. Okay, there's 3 hours, so let's number them 1, 2, 3. And again, I'm working backward. So what's 1 hour before 2:17 p.m.? That would be 1:17 p.m. What's 1 hour before 1:17 p.m.? That would be 12:17. When I get to the 12, I say, uh-oh. But again, at 12:17, it's already changed. So it should still be the p.m. The one before that is where it's going to make the change. So 12:17 will already be that p.m. The one before that, an hour less than 12:17, is 11:17, and that one will be the a.m. So I finished my 3 hours counting backward. I'm going to move my last time, 11:17 a.m., to my next column and underline it. I need to go by 40 minutes, so I'll say 10, 20, 30, 40. And now I'm going to continue to count backwards by 10 minutes. What's 10 minutes before 11:17 a.m.? That would be 11:07 a.m. What's 10 minutes before 11:07? Well, I can't really take the 10 away from the 0, so that reminds me that I have to go to the previous hour, which would be 10:57 a.m. What's 10 minutes before 10:57? 10:47 a.m. 10 minutes before that, 10:37 a.m. So I finished my 40 minutes. I'll move that time up to my minutes column. I'll write it down, and I'll underline it. And I'm now going to count back for 2 minutes, so I'll number them 1, 2. What's 1 minute before 10:37 a.m.? 10:36 a.m. What's 1 minute before 10:36 a.m.? 10:35 a.m. So I finished all my amounts of time. I know that my start time was 10:35 a.m. Let's go back to my original problem and put that in. My start time is 10:35 a.m. And that's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 2 right now. So let's review. When asked to find the start time, I set it up the same way with my 3 columns, labeling the first one H for hours, the middle one 10M for 10 minutes, and the last one 1M for 1 minute. When asked to find the start time, I need to work backward, so I write down backward nice and big and in red on the top so I don't forget that. I take my elapsed time and separate it as usual. So I write in my hours, in this case it was 3. My minutes, I break up my 10s and my 1s. So this case I had 40 minutes and 2 separate single minutes. I write down my end time and underline it, since I always underline the first column, and then I number as usual. I had 3 hours, so I number 1, 2, 3, and I am working backward in time, so I am subtracting time off of each one. So 1 hour less than 2:17 was 1:17. 1 hour less than 1:17 was 12:17. 12 when I work forward is when I change my hour, but when I work backward, it's already been changed for the 12, so I have to wait till the 11 to change it to the earlier AM. So the 12 was still PM, and when I work backward, it's the 11 hour that's the opposite AM or PM. I take my last time, write it up on the middle line, underline it since I always underline the first time in a column. And again, this was 40 minutes, so I count the 10, 20, 30, 40. And again, I subtract 10 minutes off each time. So 11:17 minus 10 minutes is 11:07. Minus 10 minutes, I can't subtract 10 minutes from 0, so that brings it to the earlier hour with the 50 minutes. So 10 minutes less than 11:07 would be 10:57 a.m. I keep subtracting the 10 minutes all the way down, and then I take that last time and move it up to the 1 minute column, and I underline it. I have 2 minutes that I need to subtract, so I number them, and then I keep subtracting minute by minute until I slowly subtract my way back to the start time. And my last time would be my start time. I can then take that and transfer it back to my final answer. Hopefully by now you can confidently say, I can find a start time when given an end time and the elapsed time. As always, we will be practicing in class. Please see a teacher if you have any questions or concerns as you're practicing. Good luck with this lesson.